What are the 49ers going to do about Trey Lance? You see, the NFL and all 32 of its teams have just released their depth chart for this coming season, and when you go to the 49ers depth chart and scroll to QB, what you see is Brock Purdy listed as their starter. And obviously that makes sense. I mean, with how he performed last season for the Niners during the regular season before his arm completely fell apart, yeah, it makes sense why they would list him as the starter heading into this season, especially when you consider the fact that he's going to probably be healthy in time for week 1. The issue arises, however, when you look at their second string, who is currently Trey Lance. Now, the problem with Trey Lance being a second string is that he was the 3rd overall pick in a draft 2 years ago. I mean, the Niners took in 3rd overall in 2021, and they spent a lot to go up and get him. They really believed he was their guy. And now it's looking like, after 2 quick seasons, they're giving up on him. And obviously, there's more to it than what's just on the surface, right? But less than 2 years ago, the Niners decided to move up from the 12th overall pick to the 3rd overall pick when they made a deal with the Miami Dolphins. And in return, the Dolphins received, I want to say, not only the 12th pick that year, but a 1st and 3rd in 2022, and another 1st round pick from the Niners in 2023. And again, they would go on to make even more moves and end up acquiring the 6th overall pick from the Eagles that year, but besides the point. What I'm saying is the Niners gave up 3 first round picks plus some to acquire Trey Lance, which means, they were heavily invested in the guy. And he has played a total of, I want to say, 4. He started in a total of 4 NFL games so far in his career, and he's already being a backup replaced by the last pick in the draft. Yes, Brock Purdy is Mr. Irrelevant, and he's replacing Trey Lance, and there's not much Trey Lance can do about it. I mean, in Trey Lance's first season, he was intended to be a backup, right? He was intended to grow and develop under Garoppolo, and Garoppolo was constantly getting injured, which was the reason for the Niners making the selection. I mean, Garoppolo has been with the Niners for 6 seasons at this point, and has only had 1 season where he's fully healthy. That was in 2019, and in 2019, the Niners made it all the way to the Super Bowl. Of course, they would go on to lose to the Kansas City Chiefs, but still, when Garoppolo is healthy, he's amazing for the 49ers. I mean, you look at his starting record with the 49ers, and you'd be surprised, right? But again, it's hard for him to stay healthy, especially with the Niners, which is why they ended up drafting Trey Lance. And in his first season with the team, Trey Lance was able to start in 2 games because Garoppolo missed some time, right? And in those 2 games, in one of the games he started was against the Arizona Cardinals in week 5 of, I want to say, 2021. And in that game, he passed about 15 for 29 completion. So like a 50% completion percentage, had 1 interception. His QB rate was about 58, so he didn't have the best game. And the Niners actually ended up losing to the Cardinals 10-17. Now, that was Trey Lance's first career start, but that wasn't the first time he got action in the NFL. In fact, that came just the week before when he played in about half the game versus the Seattle Seahawks in week 4 of 2021 because, Jimmy Garoppolo went down mid-game, so Trey Lance picked up the pieces and ended up, losing the game again to Seattle 21-28. Of course, in that game, he had a slightly better performance, I'd say. He threw for 2 touchdowns. His QB rate jumped to 117. His passing completion percentage was about 50. So his performance against the Seahawks in that half game was much better than the Cardinals, but it didn't really matter. He lost both games. And so, as soon as Garoppolo was ready, they picked up the pieces and he went on to continue the season. Until week 16, when again he missed another game versus the Houston Texans. And in that game, it wasn't really big. I mean, the Houston Texans sucked 2021. So Trey Lance took over and he balled out. He had an amazing game. I mean, 16 for 23, 69% completion percentage, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, 116 QB rate. This dude balled, and he only got sacked 1 time. He was fantastic versus the Houston Texans. Of course, they weren't the best team in 2021, but he balled out. And then I want to say Garoppolo ended up finishing the season. 49ers made the playoffs, and that was that. They didn't really go, they didn't win a Super Bowl in 2021 or anything, but they made the playoffs. And things, 49ers fans really got excited for 2022 and what the future brought with Trey Lance, especially after his last outing with the Houston Texans. So 2022 rolls around, and all of a sudden, Garoppolo is still on the roster. It was a very weird offseason, but Garoppolo stays with the team, and all of a sudden, Garoppolo is now Trey Lance's backup heading into 2022, and that makes sense. I mean, the Niners were trying to move away from that old injury-prone QB. They were tired of their QB getting injured, so they decided to head young. Felt like maybe Trey Lance was ready after taking the first season off, kind of just learning. So week 1 versus Chicago Bears, Trey Lance starts, and it's an absolute mess. But it's not his fault, right? I mean, the field was absolutely flooded, raining like crazy. Basically, it was a slugfest, and both teams couldn't really get anything going through the air. So he ended up passing only 164 yards, had 1 interception, completion percentage about 46% that game. It was rough, it was nasty. But, the Bears end up coming away with the win, 10-19, and it's okay. It's okay. We'll head into week 2, where they're going to play Seattle in San Francisco. It's not going to be as rainy, right? Well, in his second game that season, Trey Lance goes and gets hurt immediately. He only had 3 passing attempts that game before going down with a season-ending injury. And all of a sudden, he was done. What the Niners were hoping to get away from with Garoppolo has now occurred to their new young rookie QB, which is tragic at this point. So Garoppolo comes, fills in for the Niners, and he does really well. I mean, he ended up winning the game for Seattle 27-7 off the back of his defense, really. But besides the point, the Niners win that game, and he's their QB all the way through week 13, where he himself then gets injured versus the Miami Dolphins. But at that point, he's leaving the Niners in good hands. They have a pretty solid record. Defense is amazing. Offense is fantastic. And hell, they're going to add Christian McCaffrey? So this team is absolutely stacked at this point. But now the only QB left on the roster is basically Brock Purdy, Mr. Irrelevant. So the season is put into his hands, right? And in Brock Purdy's first ever career start, he's going head-to-head with a very good Miami team. I mean, this Miami team in 2022 was undefeated for a good portion of the season before Tua started having head injuries. Anyway, he'd go up against that Miami team, he'd ball out, pass for 200 yards plus, 2 touchdowns, and he'd kill Miami 33-17 to put the Niners in a very good position. All of a sudden, they're 8-3, and Mr. Irrelevant is going crazy for them. And he wouldn't slow down. I mean, in almost every other week for the rest of the season, Brock Purdy would have a QB rating of above 110. It'd be above 110. He was doing amazing. It wasn't just the defense. I mean, mostly. But, Brock Purdy played fantastic the rest of the season. Niners finished the season, 14-3? Yeah, they did not lose a game after that. So Brock Purdy did amazing in 2022. And then the playoffs roll around, and he ends up messing up his arm, and it stops the Niners from making a push to the Super Bowl. Absolutely tragic. I mean, they had no QB versus the Eagles, and there was nothing they could really do about that. But, that ended the season with Brock Purdy having a fantastic year, and Trey Lance looking very injury-prone, similar to, Jimmy Garoppolo. So that left the Niners front office with a very difficult decision, and it looks like they've made it. They've chosen Brock Purdy over Trey Lance. Now, there's only so much the Niners can do with it. Trey Lance at this point, because now he's confirmed to be a backup. Maybe they trade him for a piece or two, maybe for a future draft pick, or maybe they keep him around as the backup because 49ers QBs clearly seem to be very injury prone. No matter who it is, they are going to get hurt. That's just how it's been going, right? So maybe for precaution, they keep Trey Lance around to be Brock Purdy's backup. But at that point, it's like, you really messed up. You wasted a 3rd overall pick because Trey Lance is not the guy anymore. So, maybe they keep him as a backup, or maybe they trade him for a future piece. I don't know. I don't know what the Niners are going to do with him. But that's about it for the video. I'll catch y'all later. Much love.